Hiya. I'm Santi. I'm from Rowlandsgill in Gateshead. I've lived in Walker for the last few years. I went to a Methodist church as a kid, and I'm now planted in St Luke's, which is just along Claremont Road in the centre of Newcastle. Yeah.
Awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, your testimony?
My mum had a faith. My dad wasn't around as a kid, so we were taken to church when I was about 7-year-old, a Methodist church. I loved to be there but didn't really believe it. Wanted to believe it but had no acknowledgement to know like the people were caring and loving for each other. But yeah, I remember praying a few times, if it's real, show us, you know. But yeah, I found community there. I found a way to be part of, more so than I'd felt anywhere else. That was my early childhood.
So what ages did you go to?
So I was there between kind of 7 and like 15, and then by 15 I wasn't really there at all. I was just popping in for the odd social occasion. But at 17 I ended up getting invited to go to Spring Harvest, which is like a Christian convention down at Butlins in Skegness. And I was 17 then, I was a teenager. I got to play in the basketball tournament. God knew that, you know, that was a big pull for why I wanted to go down. And then I was involved in a lot of the teenage stuff that was happening there in terms of the worship and the gathering, and it felt more real to me then. But at the same time, some of the cynicism from early days was still there. I had no confirmation, so I wasn't sure. There was a point where I was in some kind of conference room with a lot of people, and the message in there was powerful. I don't remember it now, but it was powerful, and I remember then asking him, Father, if this is real, show us. I really need to know, because I can see something here and I just need to know. The answer to that prayer didn't come. I was 21-year-old, so it was a few years later.
So you were seeking?
Yeah.
So you always had like a seeking heart, but never really got it until later on.
There was too many people saying that it doesn't exist or that it's not real, so for that reason it's hard to be steadfast in something when you haven't had it confirmed, even if it all makes sense to your deeper resonance, you know.
Okay, so at 17 you went to Spring Harvest, you had an amazing time, but you also said you didn't have an encounter until you were 21.
Yeah.
So what happened after Spring Harvest?
So I was still no idea who I was as a person. I had no identity, and I was trying to form it. You know, I'd started with basketball, and then I went on to kind of trying to get involved in sporty things, and then going out on nights out. You know, and bit by bit I was trying to form this reality or this identity that just wasn't working. You know, so you know, I drank when I was out socially with people, and I drank alcoholically from the moment I drank without ever knowing that. So binge drinking, not being able to handle how much I drank, and so on. And then in that came recreational drugs as well, and I liked that. I liked to be able to escape how I felt. I didn't necessarily like the aftermath, losing the money and getting into trouble and things like that.
Why did you want to escape?
The feeling of not being good enough, the feeling of people not wanting to listen to us or having no voice that was worth listening to, and feeling rejected by certain social groups meant that the escapism of drinking drugs was a strong pull. And in that as well, I was at an age where I was starting to spend more time with women, something that I'd felt inadequate or not good enough for in the past. You know, I was a late developer, and that meant that in my, you know, peer group at school, I was just like a lot smaller and younger looking than everybody else, and I didn't seem to come into my own, so to speak, until I was a bit older. So I was able to dive into that pool of hedonism, you know, as I reached, you know, an age where I was able. And then, you know, by kind of 21 or whatnot, I was then able, through some other people's guidance, to start looking at steroids. I was growing cannabis, you know, and I was finding identity and changing how I felt, and being okay with that. The ego took hold when it came with steroids. You know, there was you know, that feeling of grandeur in it, being acknowledged by the women liking you and guys respecting you. But it was incredibly counterproductive. I spent more time hurting than I did enjoying the situation. It was incredibly you know, self-destructive.
So you had this sort of admiration of the world, and you had this body, and you had this peer group, but what was going on inside?
Yeah, I mean, I always felt like a fraud. It never felt like it was genuinely me. I'm a sensitive, caring, loving person who just wants to get on with people, and I was doing what I best felt I could to try to make things work. I needed something spiritual to happen then, or I was spiritually dead is the best way to describe it, because I just wasn't doing anything that was virtuous. I was cutting corners, and I was burning the candle at both ends, and it was just being kind of lulled over by the drugs or the sex or the whatever I was doing to change how I felt each day. But inside there was a longing and a care for something better, and I felt like it would be the right relationship, or it would be the right drug, or it would be the right job, like the right thing would come along. I had this hope, the next best thing. Yeah, it's the best way to describe it. Yeah. And then even, with the self-destruction being where it was, God reached out, but I didn't want it at that time. I could go into it, but it's just, there'll be a time for that. What it meant was that I ended up being homeless. My addictions went through the roof, and especially alcoholism. I was incredibly volatile. I was hurting a lot, and I was depressed in the deepest depression I've ever known. My mental health had gone through the roof. I'd been given some admissions into mental health hospitals. I'd given a diagnosis, and I'd been given an identity, a false identity. I was a kid with mental health problems, and